Hey guys, tonight we're going to swap our cozy modern homes for the drafty, often opulent, but strangely terrifying halls of a medieval castle. We often picture medieval royal courts as glamorous places, filled with knights, ladies, grand feasts, and heroic deeds. But what if I told you that for many, life within these gilded walls was actually awful? I mean, truly awful. We're talking about a level of intrigue, danger, and sheer discomfort that, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a single month of. It's a side of medieval power that's far less glorious and much more unsettling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to a grand medieval castle, perhaps in 13th century France or England. The stone walls are thick, the tapestries rich, and the air is filled with the scent of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the faint, underlying odor of, well, medieval life. You are no longer a modern observer, you are a member of the court, perhaps a lesser noble, a hopeful cleric, or a lady in waiting. And the first, most pervasive reality you face is that this opulent setting is, in essence, in a gilded cage, the royal purgatory. Life at a medieval royal court was a constant, suffocating struggle for power and influence. It wasn't just about grand titles or inherited wealth. Every single day was a subtle, often dangerous, competition for the king's or queen's favor. Imagine yourself always on guard, constantly weighing your words, scrutinizing every glance, trying to discern who was rising and who was falling. Your survival, your family's future, and your very standing depended on navigating this treacherous social labyrinth. The court was a magnet for ambition. Nobles from across the kingdom flocked to it, vying for positions, land, and royal patronage. Knights sought glory and command. Clerics aimed for bishoprics and papal favor. Ladies in waiting hoped to make advantageous marriages or gain influence through the queen. This relentless competition meant that genuine friendships were rare, and trust was a dangerous luxury. Everyone was a potential rival, a possible spy, or a convenient scapegoat. This constant striving created an atmosphere of profound paranoia and suspicion. You'd whisper secrets in hushed tones, always looking over your shoulder, convinced that someone was listening, ready to report your indiscretion to a jealous rival, or, worse, directly to the monarch. Accusations of treason, heresy, or disloyalty could be easily fabricated and, once leveled, incredibly difficult to disprove. A single misspoken word, a misinterpreted gesture, or a perceived slight could lead to disgrace, imprisonment, or even death. Imagine living every moment of your waking life knowing that an enemy could be lurking just around the corner, waiting for you to make a mistake. The court's physical environment, despite its outward splendor, was also a challenge. Castles were cold, drafty, and often dimly lit by flickering torches and candles. The stone walls, while providing defense, also amplified sound, making privacy almost impossible. Imagine trying to conduct a private conversation when every whisper could echo through the halls. The sheer lack of personal space, especially for lower-ranking courtiers, was a constant discomfort. You might share a small room with several others, with no real solitude from dawn till dusk. Moreover, the court was often mobile. Kings and queens didn't always reside in one grand palace. They frequently traveled, moving from one castle or manor to another, taking their entire court with them. This meant constant packing and unpacking, arduous journeys over muddy roads, and the disruption of any semblance of routine. Imagine having to live a semi-nomadic existence, always on the move, your belongings constantly in transit, never truly settling anywhere. This intense pressure and physical discomfort, combined with the underlying political tension, meant that court life, for all its privilege, was a form of royal purgatory. It was a place where ambition often led to despair, where power was gained at immense personal cost, and where luxury often masked profound misery. The glittering facade of silks, jewels, and grand feasts concealed a brutal reality of constant struggle, fear, and a pervasive lack of genuine comfort or peace of mind. It makes your most stressful job interview seem like a relaxing chat, doesn't it? You've experienced the suffocating reality of the gilded cage, where power and paranoia reigned supreme. But the threat to your life in a medieval royal court wasn't just political or psychological, it was often terrifyingly physical, lurking in the most intimate of places, poisoned chalices. Treachery lurks. For monarchs and ambitious courtiers alike, assassination by poison was a constant, insidious fear, turning every meal and every drink into a potential instrument of death. Imagine attending a lavish royal banquet. The hall is filled with music, laughter, and the scent of roasted meats and fine wines. But for you, whether you are the monarch or a high-ranking noble, every dish, every goblet, is viewed with a hidden layer of suspicion. The fear of poison was pervasive in medieval courts, a silent killer that left no visible wounds and often mimicked natural illness, making it the preferred weapon of choice for ambitious rivals or desperate enemies. Why was poison so feared? Because it was difficult to detect and almost impossible to counter. There were no modern forensic tests, no chemical analysis labs. A skilled poisoner could administer substances that caused symptoms resembling common diseases, sudden stomach cramps, vomiting, fever, or a slow wasting sickness. This meant that a sudden illness, especially in a politically inconvenient individual, was almost always suspected of being the work of a poisoner. Imagine a powerful duke suddenly succumbing to a violent stomach ailment after a royal feast. Whispers of poison would immediately ripple through the court. The methods of poisoning were varied and insidious. Food and drink. This was the most common and feared method. Poisons could be mixed into wine, smeared on the rim of a goblet, or subtly blended into sauces or finely chopped meats. Imagine having a personal taster, a trusted servant whose job it was to consume a portion of your food and drink before you. Their life a grim buffer between you and certain death. Even then, slow-acting poisons might not affect the taster immediately, claiming their victim hours or days later. Contaminated clothing or objects poisons could be applied to clothing, jewelry, or even parchment, designed to be absorbed through the skin. Imagine a rival sending you a beautiful gift, a pair of gloves, a new robe, oblivious that it carried a deadly, invisible coating, fumes in rare, more sophisticated cases. Poisons could be introduced as fumes or vapors, perhaps released into a bedchamber, causing a slow, undetectable decline. The range of poisons available, though not scientifically understood as we know them, was surprisingly diverse. Medieval apothecaries and herbalists, for all their genuine medical knowledge, also possessed sinister knowledge of deadly plants and minerals. Arsenic, a colorless, odorless, and tasteless powder, was particularly favored due to its ability to mimic symptoms of digestive illness. Belladonna deadly nightshade, hemlock, and monkshood were also known for their lethal properties. Imagine the court physician, supposedly there to heal, being secretly tasked with concocting a deadly brew for a political rival. While some modern forensic analyses on medieval remains have attempted to identify poisons, in the case of Richard III, definitive proof is often challenging due to degradation and the lack of precise historical records, leaving much open to academic debate and interpretation of contemporary accounts. This constant threat fostered intense paranoia in the court, not just for the monarch, but for everyone who aspired to power. You'd carefully observe who prepared your food, who poured your wine, who stood too close with a veiled hand. Trust became a dangerously rare commodity. A seemingly innocent gesture, like a servant offering you a piece of fruit, could be a prelude to your demise. The court became a nest of suspicion, where every kindness might hide a deadly intent. Kings and queens, in particular, lived under this constant shadow. Their close family members, disgruntled nobles, or foreign agents could all view poison as a discreet and effective way to remove them. The deaths of several historical figures were widely rumored to be poisonings, even when attributed to natural causes. Charles VI of France, known for his periods of madness, was often suspected of being poisoned, leading to a breakdown in court stability. The knowledge that your food, your drink, your very surroundings could be weaponized added an immense psychological burden. Every meal became an ordeal, every social gathering a performance of vigilance. This constant state of alert, this deep-seated fear of treachery from within, eroded mental peace and contributed significantly to the stress and instability of court life. It makes your most cautious dining choices seem wonderfully carefree, doesn't it? You've imagined the constant threat of poisoned chalices and the pervasive paranoia, but the medieval royal court, for all its outward splendor, harbored a less dramatic, yet equally debilitating, threat, filth, and folly, unsanitary splendor. Despite the lavish tapestries and rich attire, these grand palaces were often hotbeds of disease, permeated by a shocking lack of hygiene and a pervasive stench that would overwhelm modern senses. Imagine walking through the supposedly opulent halls of a medieval castle, perhaps during a grand celebration. Your modern nose would instantly recoil. The air would be thick with a cocktail of unpleasant odors, stale sweat, unwashed bodies, human and animal waste, decaying food, and the ever-present scent of wood smoke. This wasn't just a minor discomfort, it was a constant assault on the senses, a pervasive miasma that contributed directly to widespread illness. Unlike modern palaces, medieval castles were not designed with sophisticated plumbing or waste disposal systems. There were no indoor toilets as we know them. Instead, nobles and servants alike would use privies, simple outhouses or chutes that emptied directly into moats or cesspits below the castle walls. Imagine the grim reality of these privies, cold, drafty, and often overflowing, their stench permeating the surrounding areas. For those living or working near them, the constant exposure to raw sewage was a direct invitation to disease. The concept of personal hygiene was rudimentary at best. Bathing was infrequent, often seen as a luxury or even a health risk in some medieval medical theories. While some nobles might have had access to private bathtubs, these were rarely filled with hot water and used daily. Most people, even royalty, would simply dry clean themselves by rubbing down with cloths and perfumes. Imagine the lingering body odor of dozens, even hundreds, of people living in close proximity, rarely washing thoroughly. Their clothes, often made of thick wool or linen, were also infrequently cleaned. Lice and fleas were universal companions, regardless of social status, their constant itching a fact of daily life. These parasites were not just annoying, they were vectors for deadly diseases. Waste management within the castle was virtually non-existent. Food scraps, animal bones, and general refuse were often simply thrown onto the floor, where dogs and rats would scavenge. The vast number of people and animals, horses, dogs, birds of prey, living within the confined space of a castle meant a constant accumulation of waste. Imagine walking across floors littered with discarded food, bone fragments, and the droppings of animals. This unsanitary environment was a perfect breeding ground for rats and mice, which in turn carried disease-bearing fleas. The dining halls, despite their grand tables and fine silverware, were not exempt from this filth. Leftover food would decay, attracting flies and vermin. Without refrigeration, food spoilage was a constant threat, leading to bouts of food poisoning and digestive illnesses among the court. Imagine a grand feast, but knowing that the very food you eat could be contaminated, leading to agonizing stomach cramps hours later. Even the royal bedchambers, for all their rich furnishings, often lacked proper hygiene. Chamber pots would be used and emptied infrequently. The heavy hangings and tapestries, while adding warmth and grandeur, also harbored dust, dirt, and parasites. The air, already thick with smoke from braziers and fireplaces, would be further polluted by the pervasive stench. The lack of sanitation meant that disease was rampant within royal courts. Fevers, dysentery, smallpox, and other infectious diseases could sweep through a castle with terrifying speed, claiming lives indiscriminately. While royalty might receive slightly better care from their physicians, the fundamental lack of hygiene meant they were just as vulnerable to contagion. The splendor of court life often came hand in hand with constant illness and a high mortality rate, even for those at the very top. While exact records of medieval court hygiene are rare and often anecdotal, archaeological findings from castle excavations consistently reveal evidence of widespread waste accumulation and unsanitary conditions. Corroborating literary accounts of pervasive filth, the persistent stench alone would be enough to make a modern person ill. For medieval courtiers, however, this was simply the norm, a background hum to their lives. They would use perfumes and fragrant herbs to mask the odors, but the underlying filth remained. This pervasive lack of cleanliness, hidden beneath layers of luxury, created a truly dangerous environment where daily life was a constant battle against unseen pathogens. So, as you picture the glamorous medieval royal courts, remember the grim reality that lay beneath the surface. For all their outward splendor, these palaces were often teeming with filth, making them constant breeding grounds for disease. The unsanitary splendor meant that the very setting of power and privilege was a major contributor to the ill health and misery of its inhabitants, turning their opulent lives into a constant struggle against filth and folly. It makes you truly appreciate modern plumbing and disinfectant, doesn't it? You've explored the unsanitary splendor of medieval courts, a constant breeding ground for disease. Now, let's delve into one of the most fundamental aspects of royal life, one that was rarely about personal choice or affection, but rather about power and strategy, marital misery, unions of convenience. For medieval royalty and high nobility, marriage was a political tool, a strategic alliance, often leading to profoundly unhappy and even dangerous personal lives. Imagine yourself as a medieval prince or princess, or perhaps a duke or duchess in line for a significant inheritance. From your earliest years, your future spouse is likely being chosen for you, not by you. Your parents, especially the monarch or powerful head of your noble house, would engage in intricate negotiations with other ruling families, weighing factors that had absolutely nothing to do with personal compatibility or love. The paramount concerns were political alliances. Will this marriage secure a crucial peace treaty, prevent a war, or strengthen a military alliance against a common enemy? Territorial expansion, Chiwinaika consolidation. Will the union bring new lands, strategically important castles, or consolidate control over existing territories? Dynastic continuity. Will the marriage produce legitimate heirs, preferably male, to ensure the continuation of the family line and prevent succession crises? Financial gain. Will a substantial dowry be brought into the family? Or will access to lucrative trade routes or rich mines be secured? Love, or even affection, was a secondary, almost irrelevant, consideration. If it developed after marriage, it was a fortunate bonus, not a prerequisite. Imagine being a young woman, barely into your teens, suddenly uprooted from your homeland and sent to a foreign court, to marry a man you've never met, whose language you might not speak fluently, all to secure a peace treaty between two kingdoms. Your feelings were entirely irrelevant. Your duty was to your family and your realm. The actual wedding ceremony, while grand and symbolic of the alliance, often masked the stark reality of the union. The initial interactions between the royal couple could be awkward, distant, or even hostile. Imagine being expected to share a bed with a stranger, to produce heirs, and to present a united front to the court and the kingdom, all while feeling alienated and isolated. The primary duty of a royal wife was to produce heirs, preferably sons. The pressure was immense. If she failed to conceive, or consistently gave birth to daughters, her position could become precarious. She might face public disapproval. Her husband might seek an annulment, often on dubious grounds, or he might simply take mistresses openly. further humiliating her. Imagine the constant anxiety of conception and childbirth, knowing that your very status and the future of your family depended on your womb. This relentless pressure was a profound source of marital misery. While many royal marriages were indeed unhappy, the concept of love matches gained some philosophical traction later in the medieval period, though still rare for dynastic purposes, leading to ongoing historical debates about the emotional realities of royal couples. For the royal husband, while he had more freedom than his wife, his choices were equally dictated by political necessity. He might be forced into a marriage with a woman he found unattractive, unintelligent, or simply unbearable, all for the sake of the realm. His personal desires were often sacrificed for the good of the kingdom. While he could seek solace in mistresses, his public duties and the need for a legitimate heir from his queen remained paramount, often creating a strained and hypocritical marital dynamic. Infidelity was a constant undercurrent. For men, mistresses were often tolerated, provided they didn't threaten the legitimacy of the queen's heirs. For women, however, infidelity was a grave offense, a threat to dynastic purity, and could lead to severe punishment, including imprisonment, banishment, or even execution. The double standard was stark and brutal, trapping royal women in a gilded cage of surveillance and suspicion. Divorce, or rather annulment, was a complex and difficult process, requiring papal approval, often granted only on very specific grounds like consanguinity, blood relation, or pre-existing vows. It was a tool wielded for political convenience, not personal happiness. Imagine being trapped in a miserable, loveless marriage for decades, unable to escape due to powerful political or religious barriers. The children born of these unions were often caught in the middle. They were the very purpose of the marriage, yet their personal relationships with their parents might be distant, shaped by the formality of court life and the parents' own marital strife. They were raised as future pawns in the same political game, destined to repeat the cycle of arranged marriages. So, as you envision the grand royal weddings of medieval Europe, remember that behind the lavish ceremony and political fanfare lay a stark reality of personal sacrifice. These were unions of convenience, driven by power, land, and lineage, not by affection. For many, royal marriage was a form of marital misery, a lifetime lived under the weight of political duty, where personal happiness was a luxury rarely afforded. It makes you profoundly grateful for the freedom to choose your own partner, doesn't it? You've explored the horrifying reality of medieval royal marriages, which were often miserable political unions. But amidst all the courtly splendor and ruthless ambition, another deeply unsettling aspect pervaded palace life childhood's cost: pawns of power. For royal children, being born into such an esteemed lineage often meant a life devoid of genuine affection, marked by constant political manipulation and a profound lack of personal agency from their earliest years. Imagine yourself as a medieval prince or princess, perhaps barely 5 years old. Your crib might be carved from exotic wood, draped in fine silks, and attended by numerous servants and nursemaids. But this outward luxury belies a chilling reality. You are not primarily a cherished child. You are a valuable dynastic asset. Your existence, and from birth, is intertwined with the political ambitions of your parents, your kingdom, and distant rival courts. Your earliest years would be shaped by the immense pressure to simply survive. Infant and child mortality rates were staggeringly high in the Middle Ages, even for royalty, due to disease, poor sanitation, and limited medical knowledge. A healthy birth and early survival were celebrated not just as personal joys, but as crucial victories for the stability of the realm. Imagine being a tiny infant, unaware that your very existence is a matter of state importance, constantly prayed for and guarded against unseen illnesses. From a very young age, your future was meticulously planned, often before you could even walk or talk. Your potential marriage was a constant topic of discussion. Imagine your parents, the king and queen, or powerful regents, poring over genealogies, discussing alliances, and negotiating dowries with foreign ambassadors, all to determine which distant kingdom you, their young child, would be sent to, and to whom you would be betrothed. You would have no say in this. Your personal feelings, your future happiness, were irrelevant compared to the political or territorial gains the union could bring. Sometimes, you might be sent away to another court as a child, often to the very kingdom of your future spouse, or to a powerful ally's court. This was ostensibly for your education, or to cement an alliance, but it was also, effectively, a form of political hostage-taking, ensuring your family's good behavior. Imagine being torn from your parents, your siblings, and your familiar surroundings at a tender age, sent to live among strangers in a foreign land, knowing that your safety was a direct guarantee of a peace treaty. This would be a terrifying and emotionally scarring experience, fostering a deep sense of abandonment and insecurity. Your education was rigorous, but it was often more about duty than discovery. You would learn Latin, perhaps other languages, history, strategy, and courtly etiquette. For boys, there would be military training from a young age. For girls, instruction in managing a vast household and presenting a regal demeanor. But the emphasis was on preparing you for your predetermined role: a future ruler, a political spouse, a pawn in the grand game of power. There was little room for personal interests or deviation from this prescribed path. While some royal children certainly experienced affection from their parents, the overriding priority of dynastic continuity and political strategy often meant a more formal and less emotionally nurturing upbringing compared to modern childhoods. A topic actively explored in studies of medieval royal families. Sibling relationships could be incredibly complex and dangerous. While you might share a genuine bond with your brothers and sisters, you were also often direct rivals for the throne or for favorable positions. This competition, subtly or overtly encouraged by ambitious factions at court, could lead to jealousy, suspicion, and even deadly plots. Imagine growing up with siblings who were simultaneously your closest companions and your greatest threats, knowing that only one of you might ultimately wear the crown. Even your daily life within the castle was governed by strict protocols. You would always be surrounded by servants, tutors, and courtiers, constantly observed, rarely enjoying true privacy. Your actions, your words, your very expressions would be scrutinized for any sign of weakness or dissent. This constant surveillance instilled a sense of perpetual performance, making it difficult to form genuine relationships or to simply be a child. So, as you picture the innocent faces of medieval royal children, remember the immense burden they carried. From their earliest breaths, their lives were not their own. They were pawns of power, their destinies meticulously charted for political gain, their personal happiness often sacrificed for the good of the realm. This inherent childhood's cost reveals a chilling truth about the price of royalty in medieval Europe, turning their gilded nurseries into unwitting crucibles of manipulation and predetermined fate. It makes you incredibly grateful for childhood innocence and the freedom to choose your own path, doesn't it? You've now seen how royal children were mere pawns in a ruthless game of power. This pervasive atmosphere of suspicion and control extended to every member of the court, ensuring that even in the most private moments, there was no true escape, constant surveillance. No privacy, no peace. Life within a medieval royal court meant living under perpetual scrutiny, fostering a deep-seated paranoia that eroded mental well-being and shattered any hope for genuine solace. Imagine yourself as a high-ranking noble, a lady-in-waiting, or even a trusted chamberlain within the king's inner circle. Your position grants you proximity to power, but it also strips you of any semblance of privacy. Every action, every word, every gesture is observed, scrutinized, and potentially misinterpreted or weaponized by rivals. There are no private offices, no personal spaces as we understand them. Even your bedchamber might be shared, or open to servants who could be listening. The lack of architectural privacy in medieval castles contributed significantly to this environment. Rooms often opened directly onto each other, with doors frequently left ajar, or only simple curtains serving as partitions. Passageways were narrow and constantly trafficked, This meant that genuine solitude was almost impossible to find. Imagine trying to read a private letter or have a confidential conversation, knowing that a servant might be just outside the curtain, listening intently, ready to report any indiscretion to a jealous rival. The court was a breeding ground for espionage and informants. Every major noble, every ambitious cleric would have their own network of spies, often using their servants, pages, or even seemingly innocuous courtiers to gather intelligence. Whispers of disloyalty, rumors of illicit affairs, or hints of political ambition would be meticulously collected and passed up the chain, ready to be deployed as ammunition in the brutal game of courtly intrigue. Imagine confiding in a trusted friend, only to later discover your words have been twisted and reported, landing you in deep trouble with the monarch. Trust was a dangerous luxury, and betrayal lurked behind every friendly smile. For the monarch themselves, the surveillance was even more intense, but tragically, often less effective at protecting them. While they had their own elaborate security details, including bodyguards and chamberlains, these very individuals could be part of a conspiracy. Kings lived under constant watch, their every move scrutinized by those who served them, and whose loyalty was always conditional on power and reward. This constant vigilance from both friends and foes fed the monarch's own paranoia. As we discussed earlier, creating a vicious cycle of suspicion and fear. This relentless lack of privacy and the omnipresent threat of being watched led to profound psychological distress. You would constantly filter your words, censor your thoughts, and carefully manage your public persona. This emotional suppression, this inability to truly relax or be yourself, would be incredibly draining, leading to chronic stress, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of loneliness. Imagine living a life that felt like a continuous theatrical performance, always on stage, never truly able to drop your guard. The gossip and rumor mill was a powerful force, fueled by this constant observation. A misinterpreted glance, a moment of laughter with the wrong person, or a perceived slight could quickly escalate into a damaging rumor that threatened your reputation, your standing, and even your safety. Your public image was everything, and it was constantly being judged and shaped by those around you. You'd learn to be incredibly careful about your alliances, your conversations, and even your expressions. Even private moments, like illness or personal grief, could become public spectacles. A monarch's sickness was a matter of state, closely watched for signs of weakness. A noble's private sorrow could be seen as an opportunity for rivals to gain advantage. There was no sanctity of personal space or emotion. Everything was potentially fodder for the court's relentless political machinery. While historical accounts are filled with anecdotes of courtly intrigue and espionage, the systematic nature of surveillance and its psychological toll are increasingly analyzed by modern historians, moving beyond mere dramatic storytelling to understand its pervasive impact. So, as you envision the majestic medieval court, remember that beneath the glittering surface of wealth and power lay a profound lack of personal freedom. For courtiers and even the monarch, life was a constant ordeal of constant surveillance. No privacy, no peace. It was a gilded cage where every word and every gesture was scrutinized, ensuring that true solace was a rare and elusive luxury. It truly makes you appreciate personal boundaries and the privacy settings on your devices, doesn't it? You've experienced the constant surveillance and the psychological drain of court life. But when illness inevitably struck a king, queen, or powerful noble, the relief they sought was often more terrifying than the ailment itself. Medical malady, quacks, and cruelty. The limitations of medieval medicine, coupled with the dangers of incompetent or even politically motivated court physicians, meant that even the most powerful individuals faced agonizing treatments and a high risk of death, not despite, but sometimes because of their medical care. Imagine the king, racked by a persistent fever, perhaps suffering from severe abdominal pain, or a mysterious skin ailment. His royal physicians, usually a small group of learned men trained at universities or through apprenticeship, would be summoned. While some medieval doctors were genuinely learned and skilled by the standards of their time, often relying on ancient Greek and Arab texts, their understanding of anatomy, physiology, and disease causation was profoundly limited by modern standards. There was no concept of germ theory, no antibiotics, no advanced diagnostics like blood tests or x-rays. Their treatments were often based on theories of humors, the belief that illness resulted from an imbalance of the four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. This humoral theory led to treatments that often exacerbated the patient's condition. The most infamous was bloodletting. If a king had a fever, he was thought to have too much hot blood. Imagine the royal physician cutting a vein, perhaps in your arm or neck, to drain away a measured quantity of blood. This was done with lancets or even leeches. Already weakened by illness, the patient would be further debilitated by this loss of precious blood, potentially leading to anemia, shock, or increased susceptibility to infection. It was a common cure-all for a vast array of ailments, paradoxically claiming more lives than it saved. Another popular, but often dangerous, method was the use of purges and emetics. If a monarch suffered from digestive issues or was believed to have bad humors in their stomach, they might be given strong laxatives or substances to induce vomiting. Imagine the indignity and discomfort of constant purging, your body racked by cramps, further dehydrated and weakened, all in the name of expelling supposed toxins. These treatments offered little genuine relief and often severely worsened the patient's condition. Medieval remedies also included a vast array of herbs, plant extracts, animal parts, and even precious stones, often ground into powders or mixed into elaborate, foul-tasting concoctions. While some might have possessed genuine medicinal properties like willow bark for pain, many were inert, based on superstition, or actively toxic in improper doses. Imagine being given a strange, bitter draught, made from ingredients like powdered unicorn horn if you were very wealthy, dried toad, or questionable plant extracts, with no real understanding of its efficacy, praying it would alleviate your suffering. The line between medicine and magic was often blurred, and a desperate monarch might try anything. While medieval medical texts like the Canon of Medicine by Avicenna, an influential Arab physician, demonstrate significant medical knowledge for their time, their application and practice was often limited by diagnostic capabilities and the widespread acceptance of ineffective or harmful treatments like extensive bloodletting, leading to debates among historians about their true therapeutic value. The skills and integrity of court physicians varied wildly. While some were dedicated and learned, others were little more than quacks or opportunists, more interested in maintaining their lucrative position than in genuine healing. There was no formal licensing or standardized medical education as we know it. A physician's career often depended on political patronage and appearances. A misdiagnosis, an incorrect dosage, or an unnecessary procedure could easily lead to a royal patient's demise, perhaps hastened by the very hands meant to heal them. And then there was the chilling reality of deliberate poisoning. In a court rife with intrigue, a physician, or an apothecary working under his direction, could be bribed by ambitious rivals to administer poison disguised as medicine. The symptoms of many slow-acting poisons like arsenic could mimic natural illnesses, making it almost impossible to detect foul play in an era without forensic science. Imagine trusting your life to your most intimate attendant, only for him to be the instrument of your demise, calmly mixing a lethal dose into your daily tonic. The sudden, convenient deaths of several monarchs throughout medieval history were often accompanied by whispers of poison, even when officially attributed to natural causes. Even a dedicated royal physician faced immense pressure. If the monarch recovered, the physician gained immense prestige, wealth, and power. If the monarch died, especially unexpectedly, the physician could face severe punishment, even execution, accused of incompetence or treason. This intense pressure could lead to desperate measures, experimental treatments, or a reluctance to admit failure, potentially prolonging a monarch's suffering or hastening their end. So, as you reflect on the majestic medieval monarchs, remember that for all their power, they were profoundly vulnerable to the limitations of ancient medicine. Their illnesses, treated with often brutal and ineffective methods, highlight a disturbing paradox. The most powerful individuals in medieval Europe were often at the mercy of practices that, by our standards, constituted medical malady, quacks, and cruelty, making their gilded cages even more precarious. It certainly makes you appreciate modern hospitals and regulated medical practices, doesn't it? You've navigated the quacks and cruelty of medieval medicine, but for the kings, queens, and high nobility, another insidious threat, often masked by their very privileges, steadily undermined their health dietary dangers, indulgence, and illness. The lavish feasts and lack of understanding about nutrition often led to chronic ailments that modern science can easily identify, but which medieval physicians were utterly helpless against. Imagine yourself seated at a royal banquet. The long tables groan under the weight of an immense spread roasted meats. Boar, venison, beef, fowl, often heavily spiced, rich stews, thick sauces, and an endless supply of fine white bread. There are no delicate salads or lean proteins. Vegetables, while present, were often boiled into submission, losing much of their nutritional value. Fruits were seasonal and often consumed dried or preserved in honey, adding to the sweetness. This wasn't a balanced diet, it was a testament to conspicuous consumption, a display of wealth and power. The most pervasive problem was overeating and an excess of rich, fatty foods. For the medieval elite, the ability to consume vast quantities of meat and fine bread was a sign of status. Lean times were for peasants. Royalty feasted. This constant caloric surplus, coupled with a generally sedentary lifestyle, unless actively campaigning or hunting, led to widespread obesity among the nobility and royalty. Imagine the discomfort of carrying significant excess weight, the strain on your heart, your joints, and your overall mobility, all while trying to maintain a regal posture. This wasn't just aesthetic. It profoundly impacted their quality of life and long-term health. This diet, heavy in meat and refined grains, and often lacking in fresh produce and fiber, led to a cascade of digestive issues. Chronic constipation, indigestion, and various unspecified bowel complaints are frequently mentioned in historical accounts of royal health. Imagine the constant abdominal discomfort, the bloating, the irregularity, all silently endured beneath layers of expensive clothing. These weren't just minor annoyances. They could be debilitating, affecting mood, sleep, and overall energy. The consumption of large quantities of alcohol, particularly wine and later Keith's strong ale, was another major factor. Wine was often drunk throughout the day, and at banquets, it flowed freely. While a source of calories, excessive alcohol consumption led to problems like gout, a painfully inflammatory arthritis. Imagine a king, his legs swollen and throbbing with a gout attack, unable to walk, forced to conduct state business from his bed, his face contorted in pain. Gout was often seen as a disease of kings due to its prevalence among the wealthy, who could afford such rich diets and abundant alcohol. While the exact mechanisms were unknown, medieval physicians certainly noted the association between rich food, alcohol, and gout. Though their treatments were largely ineffective, relying on poultices and dietary restrictions rather than understanding the underlying metabolic causes. This is a topic often discussed in historical medical texts. The general lack of understanding about nutrition and vitamins further exacerbated these problems. Scurvy, while more common among sailors, could affect landlocked nobility if fresh produce was scarce, especially in winter. Deficiencies in other vitamins and minerals, due to a monotonous diet despite its richness, could contribute to general malaise, weakened immune systems, and chronic fatigue. You might be eating luxuriously, but still be fundamentally malnourished in certain key areas. Then there was the ever-present threat of food poisoning, Without refrigeration or modern food safety standards, spoiled meat, contaminated dairy, or improperly prepared dishes could easily cause acute, violent bouts of illness. Imagine a royal banquet descending into chaos as dozens of attendees are suddenly struck down by vomiting and diarrhea, a terrifying reminder of the invisible dangers lurking in their food. This was not always intentional, it was simply a consequence of medieval food handling. The medical knowledge of the time was, as we've discussed, woefully inadequate to address these diet-related ailments. Physicians might prescribe purges, bloodletting, or elaborate herbal concoctions, all of which often did more harm than good. The root causes, overconsumption and nutritional imbalance, remained completely unknown. So, as you envision the grand feasts of medieval royalty, remember that beneath the lavish spread lay significant dietary dangers. The very indulgence that symbolized their power was often a slow, insidious source of ill health, contributing to obesity, digestive misery, and agonizing conditions like gout. For many monarchs, their opulent lifestyle ironically led to chronic illness, ensuring that even at the pinnacle of medieval power, they were rarely truly well. It truly makes you appreciate the concept of a balanced diet and modern nutritional science, now doesn't it? You've witnessed the physical toll of lavish diets and the limitations of medieval medicine. But beyond the bodily ailments, the sheer pressure cooker of court life often led to a more insidious decline. Mental meltdown, pressure's dark toll, the constant intrigue, the fear of betrayal, the immense responsibilities, and the pervasive lack of privacy could systematically erode a monarch's sanity, leading to paranoia, depression, and even outright madness. Imagine yourself as the king or queen, the very embodiment of the realm. Every major decision, from declaring war to signing treaties, from levying taxes to administering justice, rests squarely on your shoulders. The weight of this responsibility is immense, far more than any single individual should bear. A single misstep could lead to rebellion, civil war, or the collapse of your kingdom. This overwhelming burden, this constant awareness of consequences, created an unbearable level of stress and anxiety. Compounding this is the pervasive paranoia. As we've discussed, assassination attempts were common, and poison was a constant fear. You could trust no one fully, not your closest advisors, not your family, not even your personal servants. Every whisper, every glance, every moment of silence could be interpreted as a sign of conspiracy. Imagine living every waking moment on high alert, your mind constantly racing, scrutinizing everyone around you for signs of treachery. This ceaseless vigilance would be utterly exhausting, draining your mental reserves and leading to chronic sleep deprivation. The lack of genuine privacy further exacerbated this mental torment. Your bedchamber might have been open to numerous attendants, your conversations easily overheard. There was no true solitude, no quiet space to escape the relentless demands of court life. Imagine trying to process complex political problems or grieve a personal loss, all while being constantly observed, your emotional responses scrutinized for any sign of weakness. This continuous performance, this inability to truly relax and be yourself, would be incredibly draining, pushing you towards emotional and psychological breakdown. The isolation of power was also a major factor. While surrounded by courtiers, true intimacy and honest counsel were rare luxuries. Most people sought favors, influence, or personal gain. Those who dared to speak uncomfortable truth might find themselves quickly sidelined or worse. This meant that monarchs often lived in an echo chamber of flattery and self-serving advice, making it difficult to discern reality from manipulation. This profound loneliness, coupled with the immense burden of command, could lead to deep depression and despair. Consider the historical examples. Charles VI of France. The Mad King Charles suffered from severe bouts of psychosis, believing himself to be made of glass or being chased by demons. While the exact medical cause is debated, perhaps porphyria or bipolar disorder, the immense pressure of ruling a fractured kingdom, coupled with court intrigue and potential poisoning, undoubtedly exacerbated his mental fragility. Imagine a king descending into madness, his court unable to cope, plunging the realm into chaos. While precise psychological diagnoses are challenging for historical figures, medieval chronicles often provide vivid descriptions of royal behavior that aligns with modern understandings of severe mental illness, leading to ongoing interdisciplinary historical and medical research. The lack of understanding about mental health in the medieval period meant that these psychological struggles were often attributed to demonic possession, divine punishment, or inherent moral failings. There was no concept of therapy or psychological support. A monarch suffering from profound depression or paranoia would be subjected to superstitious remedies, religious exorcisms, or even physical restraint, all of which would only worsen their condition. Imagine being locked away or subjected to bizarre cures while your mind was tearing itself apart. The constant need to maintain a dignified, powerful facade, even when consumed by inner turmoil, added another layer of strain. A monarch could not show weakness. They had to present an image of unwavering authority, even when their mind was spiraling into chaos. This relentless emotional suppression was unsustainable, leading to eventual breakdowns. So, as you picture the majestic medieval monarch on their throne, remember the unseen battle raging within their mind. The immense power came at an unbearable cost, a life consumed by mental meltdown, where the relentless pressure's dark toll could lead to profound paranoia, debilitating depression, and a tragic descent into instability. It truly makes you appreciate modern mental health support and a good therapist, doesn't it? You've witnessed the constant threat of assassination, the crushing grip of paranoia, the silent ravages of unsanitary conditions and dietary dangers, the wear of warfare, the emotional cost of political marriages, the lack of privacy, the cruelty of medieval medicine, and the dark toll of mental strain. As we conclude our exploration of medieval royal courts, let's reflect on a crown of thorns legacy of ill health. The ultimate power in medieval Europe, far from granting invulnerability, often came at a profound, often fatal cost to one's well-being. Painting a far less glamorous picture of imperial life, imagine looking back at the long line of medieval monarchs, from the powerful emperors to the more localized kings and queens. History often focuses on their political triumphs, their military campaigns, and the grand castles they built. But beneath these narratives, a more subtle yet pervasive story unfolds the story of their constant battle against illness, pain, and the relentless deterioration of their bodies and minds. The most tragic part of this legacy is the short and often painful lives led by many monarchs. While direct assassination or battle could bring a swift end, the underlying stress, constant exposure to disease, poor medical care, and unhealthy lifestyles undoubtedly weakened their bodies and minds, making them more susceptible to both illness and the machinations of their enemies. The crown, for all its splendor, was often a source of profound physical and mental suffering, truly a crown of thorns. This pervasive ill health likely contributed to the notorious erratic behavior and sometimes tyrannical rule of certain monarchs. Imagine a ruler suffering from chronic migraines, debilitating gout, or the cognitive fog of perpetual sleep deprivation, all while burdened with the immense responsibility of an entire kingdom. Such physical and mental torment could easily exacerbate existing personality flaws, leading to irrational decisions, unpredictable mood swings, and paranoid delusions. The realm often suffered not just from bad policy, but from the personal anguish and compromised judgment of its supreme leader. While medieval chroniclers often attributed erratic royal behavior solely to divine displeasure or moral failing, modern historical medical analyses increasingly suggest that chronic illness, physical pain, and severe psychological stress played significant, often overlooked, roles in shaping imperial conduct. Though definitive causal links are hard to establish posthumously, the monarch's access to the best medieval medicine, ironically, frequently compounded their woes. Primitive treatments like extensive bloodletting, Harsh purges and bizarre concoctions often did more harm than good, accelerating the decline of already sick individuals. Their immense wealth and power could not buy them effective cures for the ailments that truly plagued them. They were at the mercy of a rudimentary medical understanding. Furthermore, the very lifestyle of the court, often characterized by excess and indulgence, became a silent assassin. The lavish feasts, the rich, often unbalanced diets, the copious consumption of alcohol, and the general lack of consistent, strenuous physical activity unless on campaign created a breeding ground for chronic diseases like obesity, heart ailments, and severe digestive disorders. The symbols of their luxury were paradoxically instruments of their demise, the unique pressures of the royal role, the relentless intrigue, the constant vigilance against assassination and betrayal, the immense burden of governance, the profound isolation of power, and the lack of genuine privacy created a level of psychological stress that few modern leaders could comprehend. This relentless mental torment contributed to sleep deprivation, anxiety disorders, depression, and sometimes a complete mental breakdown, further impacting their physical health and ability to rule effectively. Finally, while not always as prominent as in earlier Roman dynasties, some hereditary weaknesses passed down through royal bloodlines meant that certain monarchs were fighting a losing battle from birth. Predispositions to conditions like gout or certain mental infirmities, compounded by the harsh realities of their reign, ensured that illness was an inescapable part of their destiny. Their lineage, the source of their power, also bequeathed them a legacy of suffering. So, as you reflect on the grandeur and power of medieval royal courts, remember the human cost paid by those who sat on its highest throne. The life of a medieval monarch was not just about limitless power and opulent ceremony. It was often a profound, often fatal, struggle against a multitude of health threats, both external and internal. The glittering crown of office frequently concealed a body consumed by disease, pain, and paranoia, truly making it a throne of thorns. It's a sobering thought that the pinnacle of medieval power was often a direct path to profound personal misery and a shortened, agonizing existence. All right. As the last echoes of our journey through the awful truth of medieval royal courts fade into the quiet of the night, it's time to gently bring our minds back to the present. You've walked through their opulent halls, felt the chill of their fear, and grappled with the profound ironies of their powerful yet precarious lives. It's a powerful reminder that history, in its quietest corners, often reveals the most poignant truths about the human condition, even for those at the very pinnacle of power. Let the images of assassination plots, constant worries, and lingering illnesses fade away, giving way to the quiet peace that surrounds you. The sense of the palace and the tension of power fade, giving way to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let any lingering thoughts of the thorny throne and the price of power drift away, replaced by a sense of relaxation and peaceful reflection. The struggles and frailties of the ancient kings now, temporarily, become part of your understanding, enriching your sense of history and the value of health and peace. As your breathing deepens and your body relaxes, know that the stories of the past are always here, waiting patiently to be rediscovered whenever you seek a gentle escape into the depths of time. But now the journey is complete. Rest easy, knowing that another story has been revealed, gently, just for you.